Manever I say ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV there, osia dem yopo.
Vormawor has finally come out to speak on his sad story or experience in the prison or jail, which I would like you to join me listening to what he said. It's very heart-touching and sad though, but we need to listen and learn from it and know the country in which we are in currently. Before you go, I would like you to subscribe to the channel for us. This is still PENDREAM TV, the only channel that brings you the best and latest updates in politics. If you are new here, please, I'll urge you or plead with you to subscribe to the channel. Share to your contact list so that they'll also have a feel of what is happening around the globe and around the political arena. Do subscribe. Do leave a comment as well, or send us your voice note on our WhatsApp number, which is showing on your screen as well. Thank you. Enjoy the story and leave a comment after listening. Thank you.
One of the things that I'm still coming to terms with is that I understand that the police were going to be very discomforted by the fact that myself and other inmates were talking about the conditions under which people were being held. I understood that. And I was expecting that even in their embarrassment about it, it will move the humanity in them to want to have a conversation about it and deal with that. What I didn't anticipate, even in terms of all the brutality I'm aware of, that their reaction to this would be violence. Then I know that, you know, for when people are weak-minded, that their response to even a genuine conversation is to use force. That's fair. On Saturday, which is, so the first day, perhaps on the Friday, they were still quite tentative about, is this really going to happen? To see it hold, you know, those inmates that their families brought food to them, returned the food away, said that no, we are not having any food or anything like that. To see it hold on the Friday, I think gravely surprised them. So on Saturday, that's when they first started. They took one of the inmates out who they sent to in Sawam. You know, we're threatening the other people, we're going to disperse you and things like that. So I was lying down reading, and that's what I spend most of my time in cell. I tend to wake up very early. Most people wake up around 12. I wake up at 5 a.m. and start reading till most people. So I was reading, listen, incidentally, in the police station, there's a TV that serves the police officers. If you come close to the cell gates, you can see it. So I was watching Key Point that was going on here in the morning. Until then, when they were in break, at some time I went back and relaxed, started reading.
3FM 92.7.
And then about 6, roughly 6 to 8, I saw 8 later, but I think 6 entered the cell, heavily armed, and then started shouting at everybody, go back. So they pushed everybody into a corner, right? And then they asked me to step out, so isolated me. And so I stepped out of the cell, and I came outside. Then one of them asked me, where are all your things? And so I asked them, what's happening? Why are you taking them? Then he repeated, where are all your things? I said, I want to know what's happening. I don't know what happened next. One of them had my neck in a lock. The other one was forcibly trying to put a lock on me. The other one was stepping on my feet with their boots. And then before I realized, punches were all over my face. And this is within coming out of the cell and behind the police counter. There was no conversation at any point. We want to move your cell, go somewhere. So we anticipated that was going to happen. In fact, when the first person was being moved out in the morning to Insawam, the cell got together and started clapping for him. The cell started singing gospel songs when the person left.
Right.
So we anticipated this was going to happen. So when they came, why are you moving me? Is a question. Or why are you go?
How many police officers were involved in this?
Now I know that there were 8 of them who held me and started punching down on me in that moment. But there were more as well because they had 2 separate vehicles also were being transported to the other place.
For just you?
For just me. So there were several individuals. Now think about it. This is not the first time I've been removed from the cells. So many times I've been asked to come out. At no point, in fact, every time that somebody comes to the counter, tells the counter CEO, they tell me, they open up, I come out. At no point have they come unlocked it and come in there with force. In fact, they wanted the inmates to see the brutality of that encounter, I think, to be able to put the fear of God in them. So for me, it was deeply surprising to see that happen. I couldn't for the life of me understand. And all of this was supervised by the individual, the 2IC of the Accra Regional Command. He was standing there.
I see.
And as this was going, he was shouting profanities at me throughout the incident. And the process of doing that, and intention obviously was to beat me up and do all of that. All of that happened. And then they ushered me out. I was in a boxers, and I was in a white top that I was wearing. That's all I had. There was no slippers, there was nothing. I was just bundled and thrown into a vehicle. I had no idea where I was being taken to. I had nothing. In fact, I didn't realize I was bleeding so much till later on, halfway into the journey, you know. And in that moment, I kept asking myself, like, what to do, because I was extremely agitated from what had happened to me.
Right. I
just kept wondering, like, what do I do? And even in my confusion, I didn't know where I was being sent to.
Right.
But I was still wondering, like, I was still processing it throughout. And I knew that we're driving off and off Accra. I had no idea where I'd been taken to. Eventually, we ended up at Dansoman. When we got there, I was completely bleeding into the water.
You were drenched in your...
I was drenched in it, you know. In fact, I could feel that this hand, there was a problem because I couldn't move it as much, you know, and the blood was still coming even as we were sitting there. So when they came to there, they spoke to the officers. They were going to throw me into the cell. In fact, they put me in the cell in there, and I was in there for a while. And then they came back because I had asked the commanding officer there that I wanted a broom because it was extremely dirty, if I could get a broom to sweep. So he brought somebody that the person should sweep the cell, and I told the person, no, I'd rather do it myself because I don't want to burden anybody. So I started it, and then they asked me to come out of the cell, and they brought me to come and sit down again. So as I was sitting there, then the 2IC who was supervising this starts again with the insults, right? So one of them went to one of the other command, I think it was one Mr. Nafiu, I can't be sure, then mentioned that let us at least take him to the hospital because he's bleeding. So that's what they decided in that moment. I was surprised that they did that because I know that the instinct was to avoid, and that perhaps they themselves were acting in a manner which they were hoping that physical scars would not show. So the bleeding kind of disconcerted them a bit.
Police explanation for what happened was that you sustained injuries in transit.
I don't know how. But I don't know what that means, to be honest. And in fact, I've reserved a lot of comments about that because for me, there's so many things that I'm still trying to make sense of.
Would you consider that an honest representation of what happened to you?
That what?
You sustained injuries.
How? In the air? I don't know how. But I mean, I know that the statement is deliberately crafted in a way, using passive or whatever language, as if injuries descended upon you, in the way in which manner descends upon a person. But I'm telling you what happened, that they did this. I know that in that moment when I was bleeding, that it confused them a bit. Because I was surprised that they themselves had a conversation to take me to the hospital, which saw to it that I was treated, bandaged, tetanus was given to me in those moments before sent back to the cell. In fact, since I've been out and they released this statement, I sent someone to, I think it's called the Opokuwari Hospital in Dansoman, to go for the medical report that the attending physician did. And the physician said that he had received calls threatening him from the police and that he was afraid to release the medical statement. And that the police had told him that if I wanted, I should come and see them and they will come with me to come for the statement.
Have you seen your medical reports?
No, I haven't. But what we had a report of is that the blood-stained shirt that they wanted to take away from me and I resisted, that we eventually passed that out to persons who had come subsequently. That incidentally, I don't know who took the picture of when I was being returned back, but some people had lined up on the street, took a picture of the incident, and that's how that picture even came into the public domain. So I'm sure they were surprised by the picture camera, which allowed them to fess up. And in fact, it's the first time I'm seeing the police admit that an inmate sustained injuries, which is at their hands.
Yeah, while you were being transferred from one station to the other. They didn't say they caused the injuries in that statement. So perhaps in the future we'll get to the bottom of this. But we'll go ahead.
This is a conversation that I think that we are clear in our minds that if we want young people not to lose faith in this democracy, we can't sweep this under the carpet. This happened last year. We are in court still suing them over it. But this conversation merits a national conversation. And we are demanding, and we're going to petition majority in parliament to take this issue up, because we can't allow this to go again.
When do you plan to do that?
Within the course of next week.
Within the course of next week. But speaking of democracy, listen, we've said a lot of things that are wrong with our country at the moment. Is there hope for our democracy to serve us?
You know, one of the things that, one of the things I was reading a lot, I really enjoy philosophy. And one of them, Edmund Burke, said something, which is that a state that lacks the means to change, lacks the means for its own conservation. To sustain our democracy, we ought to be committed to the process of enhancing it, of changing ways that do not align with that democratic culture. Professor Kwesi Prempeh talks about that. We are trying to build a democracy without Democrats. It can't happen. You know, it's almost as if you're a person living with schizophrenia. That we are professing that we want to be a democracy, but our conduct and our actions do not reflect it. We must reconcile that. And I think the biggest thing that would ensure that the democracy sustains itself is the people's belief in it. And the people seeing that it can in fact answer our most dire questions. Our questions around poverty, our questions around healthcare, around the environment. Democracy must answer those questions for those people in order for them to believe in that. We believe that all that we have done more to sustain our democracy than anything that is, even if they don't give us the credit for. Because every time young people come out for a protest, they say to us that I was so angry when I was coming to that protest. But when I left, I felt that we had done something. It's a cathartic experience to show up for a protest, to be able to release that pent-up anger. We cannot allow it to be redirected. And if they don't understand the work we are doing to sustain our democracy, we are aware of what it takes and what we are doing in the process.
Oliver, is this all worth it? Is it worth the pain you go through?
Do you think the crisis death was worth it? There's so much sin that continues to happen many years after Christ died. But I don't doubt for a fact or a second the value of that sacrifice. And I don't think that any society has changed without that process of sacrifice. I'm not counting the cost to myself. Those are individual costs. We're not going to count that. But we will always be reminded of the promise, what it would mean for others, what's the benefit they are going to derive. It's absolutely worth it. The idea that Ghana is not worth dying for, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. We are all worth it. We are all worth living a different and a better life. And if this is the path towards it, we must take it. I believe in that sincerity. And so that's why I don't measure my advocacy in terms of elections or party or who is that. Because Ghanaians don't measure what's happening to them in terms of every 4-year term. We are living that reality every day. And so I'm completely disabused about what the politics does or who is voting for who. I just know that this is not where I want this country to be. This is what every other Ghanaian tells me. And every Ghanaian other tells me that we want to be doing what we are doing, but we are afraid though. Hopefully we break that pattern of fear before it's too late. We decided that the safety of the protesters, which the police were supposed to ensure, which they were not doing, was going to be our responsibility. And so then we started redirecting the traffic.
So that's why you blocked the road? So
that's why the road was stopped, to be able to protect protesters, in order to redirect traffic. But even in that, if there was any vehicle, which was an ambulance, which was anybody with a medical condition, we allowed them through. This was consistent with what we did at last year's Occupy Jolobi House.
So then the video that circulated with some of the protesters blocking a vehicle that was in an emergent situation from going through because they said they had to go to 37 military hospital, you wouldn't let them go through?
Absolutely not. In fact, what happened was that...
That is not the case?
So that is not the case. So the police had blocked the way to 37. The only way to get there was to use the back. And what they were doing was that even if it was an emergency situation, unless it is an ambulance, they wouldn't allow. If it was not an ambulance, we would then intercede and plead with them. They still wouldn't allow, so the people had to use the back gate. But to use the back, it means that you have to go into oncoming traffic. So we have to stop oncoming traffic to allow people to be able to pass and go. This is what we did consistently.
So the protesters didn't block anybody from getting emergency care?
No single individual who needed emergency care was blocked from doing that. Now, the police had blocked down half of Accra. Invariably, the city there was a logjam traffic because they had blocked principal roads that were access roads to so many people. That's not something we could have prevented or do anything about. You understand?
Okay.
What they had failed to do was even to provide the public with alternative routes and how to be able to access critical services. None of that has happened. And in fact, nobody is questioning them on what are the alternative routes you set out when you announced those special operations. Because it was a half measure, it was never thought through, and the intention was to be able to block constitutional rights from happening in a way that suggests as if there was a security imperative.
What was the interaction or engagement with the police when the protesters had taken it onto themselves to block that part of the road for their own safety?
So, I mean, we had the prime interactions with them. Okay. In fact, when we started redirecting the traffic, what would happen is that there might be a police vehicle, or that there must be not even a police vehicle, a police officer or a military officer in Mufti who may have a sticker indicating that of any of the security services. Those vehicles, they wanted those individuals to pass, and we said no. Every individual must then be redirected, because we're not going to be able to create a situation whereby ordinary civilians would be affected by the redirection, but then you want to then create favors for persons who are affiliated to you. That we didn't allow. And that I can say categorically, we didn't allow that to happen because we wanted to be fair to everybody else. Now, consistently throughout this conversation, there was not a moment where we stopped engaging the police and asked them to redirect. Eventually, on the second day, they did that by blocking the traffic at the airport square from those who were coming on towards the Liberation Road. That's what we know they did.
Right. So when you say eventually second day they did that, they did what you did on the first day?
Yes. So the second day, that's what they had set up. But mind you, when we're going into the second day, they had issued another statement, which was clear that they are saying clearly that we're going to arrest anybody that shows up on that day. But our position has always been clear. As long as we're exercising constitutional rights, you can use force and justifiably, but we will show up. That we will not, I mean, we understood the risk of it, but it's not for our sake that we are stepping out. It's a bigger message, and so that we're not intimidated in exercise of rights. Now, on the second day, even when they issued that statement, I'm telling you, I personally called the lawyer and I called the regional command and I said, what we are reading from the statement we don't like. Let us have a dialogue as to how we can de-escalate the conversation. Response? Again, the conversation is that we have been authorized not to engage. So we are clear that it was not something that happened accidentally. They wanted to do what they did, and they did it anyway. It's the same thing that happened last year as well, that they swooped everybody out, including journalists, and arrested everybody, and Stephen kept denying that they had done that. So videos came out.
Is it right to say that perhaps the lack of agreement between the police and Democracy Hub from the very beginning is what had, created fertile grounds for what occurred on the day that, the protesters were arrested?
So this is one of the things that is important. When civilians and law enforcement agencies meet and interact, we ought to remember that only one of those groups have been trained at taxpayers' expense. Law enforcement. We paid for their training. We expect that they have the understanding to always be interested in a conversation about de-escalation when you're dealing with crowds. No, that responsibility, we took it upon ourselves because the safety of protesters has always been our concern and chief pride. Now, as far as they are concerned, their language and disposition institutionally, and everybody knows this, even when the police stop you and ask, why have I been stopped? It means that you have disrespected them and so they must brutalize you. We know the colonial origins of the police force as we have it. And so when we are dealing with them, we are very methodic in the ways in which we deal with them and even speak to them. But for some reason, just because when they say, don't do it, and he said, no, we can't, that's not how it works in a democracy, that infuriates them.
This really saddened my heart after listening. Please, this is where we have come to, and this is not the final gist we have for you. We have more in stock coming your way, and for that matter, I would like you to subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on so that you'll be the first to receive any updates that will be loaded onto the channel. Thank you. Blessed day, blessed night, wherever you are. Stay blessed.
PENDREAM TV now, so far so good. Say open online portal e wo Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases. PENDREAM TV.